Welcome back to Light Talk, where everyone can be themselves and tell their own unique paranormal and spiritual journey stories and experiences with a safe and supportive community. If you have a story you would like to share, please email me at lighttalk423@gmail.com. And while you're at it, don't forget to click on the like, share, and subscribe buttons down below. All right, we're going to get going, and we have a fabulous guest for you today. I'm excited to have her on the show. So, we're going to get started. So, go ahead and introduce yourself and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dana. My name's Leanne, the Barefoot medium. I'm from Brisbane, Australia, and work internationally, online and both in person as well. I'm an international medium, an intuitive criminal investigator, transformational coach, and twin flame. My journey has taken me all throughout the world, and I'm really grateful and blessed to be able to connect people to their loved ones who've passed over and to support people in manifesting and creating the life that they desire.
That is awesome. And I know we're going to have a lot to talk about, and just with that little bit right there, and we have all of it ready. So let's get started. So tell us how you kind of got started, and let's kind of roll with the ball.
Yeah, so I came into the world as a natural medium and empath, which means that I came into the world with my gifts, being able to see, hear, feel, and know that spirit is around me. That was quite scary as a child because I didn't have an understanding of what that was. And I came into a family that wasn't spiritually open. So they were not able to teach me and guide me in how to deal with that. So I would often say to my parents, there's people in my room, there's people in the house, and they're, no, go back to sleep, go back to bed. But for me, there was either dark shadows, which were quite heavy and, were scary at the time, or there was the sparkly lights that I would see, which I loved, and the lighter energies. I would hear people walking up and down the hallway, and I would also feel the presence of spirit people right up next to me. So I would often pull the blanket up to try and protect myself. As an empath, I also am able to pick up on the emotions or physical illnesses or injuries in living people's bodies that they may or may not be expressing. So there was kind of the spirit world aspect as well as the empath side of things and the human people. I think I love dealing with the spirit people better sometimes.
I think the same thing. I think it would be more fun to work with the spirit than the living.
Yeah. So that was a little bit about my early experiences. I kind of closed it down a little bit, or what I thought I closed down, but it was still there. And went through school and some bullying and that side of things, which was really challenging. I went to university and did psychology and criminology, and also worked in the university sector and in a senior management role, teaching and managing teaching staff and designing courses, etc., which was highly stressful. And I got the tap on the shoulder from Spirit at 2 a.m. one morning saying, okay, get up, write your resignation letter. So I did. Had no idea what I was going to do the next day or after that, but everything just unfolds the way it's meant to. So from that, I stepped back into my spiritual work and have been doing that ever since.
Very awesome. And what a feeling. How did that change your perspective of life after you did that?
Well, it was, and I always say to people, you have to do the work on yourself as well as connecting to the spirit world, because whatever's going on within you and in your personal world, whether it's your beliefs or your emotions, will translate into your connection with spirit. So if you feel like you're not worthy enough, you're not good enough, or you can't speak up, then that's going to impact your connection with those in spirit. So I had to do a lot of healing work on myself around letting go of that stress and the pattern of, as a sabotage pattern of stress and overwork and intellectualizing and overthinking and doubting myself and questioning myself and all of those things. And in amongst that, I stepped out of a really toxic, unhealthy relationship as well. So doing that work on myself, as well as connecting into spirit and learning how my connection works and how my guides communicate with me and can support me in bringing through messages and information from loved ones who've passed over.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So what all do you do with your skills now?
Well, I connect people with their loved ones who've passed over. That's my passion. I do that in one-on-one sessions as well as in group settings in person and online. I channel information, and I also am stepping further into my role as an intuitive criminal investigator and looking at particularly how I can support victims of homicide and survivors of homicide, that is, their families that are left behind. I'm doing a PhD at the moment around how mediums can support police with homicide investigations, and also have lived experience with supporting my husband who's gone through losing 2 family members to homicide. So I'm aware of what that looks like, sounds like, and feels like in terms of the grief, the trauma, and the loss. And, obviously with my psychology background, I do a lot of work with supporting grief, loss, and trauma in amongst mediumship, which, all mediums deal with grief and loss.
I have a friend that does a little bit of that, the criminal work type stuff too. And he is able to feel how they passed, and they go through the whole process of how they pass. I mean, to me, I don't know if would want to do that. So how does that feel for you? I mean, what kinds of things have you felt and seen?
Yeah.
And I mean, if you can say it, if you can talk about
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I guess going back to what I mentioned about being a child and noticing those darker and heavier energies, what I would say is nothing in the spirit realms can harm us unless we believe they can. That's the first thing I would say. I have been taught by spirit and developed my abilities to be able to recognize different energies, whether it's heavier or light energies. And what that means, and I know a lot of people talk about negative or positive, is, all spirit people were human at one point, and they had life experiences, and they had personalities that came along with them. And some human people that we come across are really respectful and gentle and kind and loving and compassionate. And some human people are disrespectful and unkind and not in integrity and all of those things. So it's, why would the spirit realms be any different? So it's just, my experiences in my human world have allowed me to notice manipulation energy like that, have allowed me to notice narcissistic or psychopathic behavior like that. My training around psychology and noticing mental health disorders has helped me with that. Drug and alcohol, I've done work in drug and alcohol rehabilitation and research in that area. So, and I also have loved ones who've passed in those ways. So I'm really quick at noticing what drugs and alcohol might be involved, or mental health disorders, particularly with criminal cases. The way in which I work is that as an empath, I'm able to, and my strongest sense is my feel. So I'm able to feel emotions and the injuries or issues with someone's physical body when they passed. Now, that can be challenging if you don't have really strong boundaries in place around how to manage your own physical energy in this world, because I'm really aware of what's going on for me personally.
Right.
And then when I step into doing a case, it'll shift and change really quickly. So I'm able to know that it's not me and detach from that energy rather than owning it and thinking it's mine. So I can then work through that information and that case and thank them for showing me where the injuries and the issues were. And that allows the victim that's passed over to gain healing because they're sharing their story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if we can hold them in that space of empathy and compassion, and, for me, it's about, tell me what happened to you. Tell me the story of your life, who you are, how you passed, what happened to you, what was involved. And the healing comes with either bringing through that sense of, and it's not closure for family members, it never ever is. They'll never get closure. It's a sense
Yeah.
of healing, of knowing what's happened to their loved one and that their loved one is now okay. And how they can maybe bring about a sense of justice and understanding and knowing of what went on. So a
Yeah.
couple of examples of a case I worked on many, many years ago that I channeled was a young girl around, I think she was about 11 or 12, who had passed, and there was some questions around what had happened with this particular case. And as part of that channeling, I went into a trance state, and I have no idea what goes on when that happens. But the person that was supporting me through that, I apparently was placing my hands on different locations on my body and saying where cuts and scratches and things were. And in checking that afterwards, they were the exact locations of where those injuries were, and also describing the scene and what had happened, and potential perpetrators or witnesses in amongst that. In the lead up to that, I also picked up on this young girl's fear and anxiety and real sense of, oh my God, what's happening to me, which can be quite scary when you're a medium connecting into that type of energy if you don't have boundaries in place or an awareness of how you work.
Yeah. And that's where my psychology comes in, because I always have this like how do people feel when they're being, I don't want to say murdered or anything, but that's kind of what it is. When they're how does the victim and the murderer, how do they feel? To be able to understand what they're going through, what are they feeling, what is, those are some things that's been a very interest of mine for many years. Just knowing, understanding that. Yeah.
There's depending on the circumstances of what's happened and how that particular victim has been taken out of this world. If we put it in a lighter context for some of your viewers or listeners, if they know the perpetrator or if they don't, there's different emotions that come with that. What I do know from connecting in with spirit and victims who've passed over and these beautiful souls is that they often leave their body prior to, on a soul level. And so there can be that level of, I guess, if you describe it as a physical world thing, it's like going in shock. And their soul leaves their physical body, and they kind of observe what's going on from an outsider's perspective in some ways. Now, that's not always the case, because some victims will pass instantly. And so they don't have that time to kind of understand or have an awareness of what's unfolding for them. Whereas others will, and they'll protect themselves by energetically leaving their bodies and observing what's going on.
That is very interesting, because I have heard that many people actually leave the body before they actually die, and they don't actually feel or anything of what's happened. So that is very interesting to hear, because, yeah. And then the ones that don't leave the body, they're the ones that could be stuck here. Would I be correct?
Well, a lot of people talk about spirit people being stuck in the physical realms. I don't believe that to be the case. I think that what it is that those heavier energies, have that fear or anxiety or that energy that comes with how they passed. And as mediums or intuitives, when we're connecting in with that, it feels like they're stuck because they're heavy, but they're not. In all my work, I've not found that. They're observing and connecting in with their family members or loved ones that are still here, and they're trying to support them and get their story through so that they can heal. So I don't believe in stuck energies. I believe there's still spirit people who connect in to share their story so they can gain healing.
Interesting. That's a different way of putting it. Yeah, I like that. I like that. That's very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So when you're once a case is resolved, how do you work with the living family members? I mean, how does that come about?
Well, most cases that I would work on, I would work directly with police, because, or not directly with family members in that way, because family members bring with them their own grief, loss, and trauma. And when we're working on a case, it's really important that I'm aware of my own energy. And if I'm also dealing with a family member whose, grief can be significant in terms of sadness, but it's also anger, resentment, guilt, pain, revenge can be there sometimes. Yep. And they're really big emotions that you're dealing with family members if you're also working on a case. So it's really important for me and my process to be working on that separately so that I don't have those energies also to kind of weed out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so that definitely.
I'm really clear on, I'm getting this from the victim and it's related to the case in this way. I may then connect and communicate with the family member and bring their loved one through. That's a very different way of them working on a case, if that makes sense.
So it's kind of more of a healing on the side after the case is solved, or okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And it would be about, here's your loved one, yes, we know they passed in tragic ways and blah, 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 and giving them that evidence to prove that their loved one is still with them and who we're communicating with, which is what all mediums must do. And to then bring through that guidance and insight to support the victim in sharing that story and healing, and support the family in moving through their trauma, their loss, their grief. And nothing will ever bring their family member back, nothing. It's just about how they navigate and move through that grief trauma journey. And it is a journey. And some days they'll go down into the depths of depression and grief and anger and all of those things. And other days they'll be more in a space of, you know, my loved one wants me to move forward. And, you know, and they're also navigating a criminal justice system, which many of them have never, ever, ever had to do.
Yeah. Huh.
So there's so many layers for family members.
Wow. And the police department, you are, at least where you are very open to mediums being involved in these cases, or are they still kind of here they are?
I would say define open. So part of my PhD research that I'm doing at the moment is looking at, and I'm doing some interviews at the moment still, looking at police perceptions, views, and beliefs around whether mediums can help with investigations. And so some of the police that I've interviewed so far, while they're open to receiving the information, many of them have indicated that there's not been a medium that's yet given them evidence that has solved the case. And so two things that I would say in amongst that, which is why I'm doing the research I'm doing, is often mediums approach police and give police information when they haven't really checked in that they're connecting with the case appropriately, and or they don't know police processes and protocols in amongst it. Police have to collect evidence. It has to be evidential and something they can feel, touch, or prove in a court of law. Otherwise, police cannot take it forward. So my thing with mediums doing that is you have to be aware of police protocols and how that works, and have your processes in place and have some runs on the board for police to be open to hearing the information, the evidence, and the insights that you have. So there are offices that are open. There are others who are not, just like in our human world.
Yeah.
There are some skeptics that will take information and can have their mind changed, and there are some skeptics who will never be open. So you've got to know the difference.
Oh, and that makes sense. That makes sense because, you know, they have to have their evidence and everything. If you were to be able to take them into the actual place that it happened and all of this, how many have you been able to take and get the evidence?
Well, I mean, that's I guess I'd flag that as an interesting question, because our role as a medium is almost like a consultant for police. You know, so we give that information, they then investigate it and determine whether it is evidential and whether it is provable in that court of law setting. And so sometimes we give that information to police and they investigate it, and sometimes we don't get that confirmation or information back to say whether it was a good lead or a good information or helped resolve a case. So my answer to that is I have to trust the information that the victim passes on to me and that I pass on to police, that it will help or that it may lead to something else that will help. So it may just be a piece of information that opens their mind to look at something differently, rather than being a piece of evidence. So that's a really difficult question for me to answer because I'm not a police officer who investigates homicides, and that's their job. My job is bringing the information through from the victim and passing that on. And I think that's a really important thing, because part of why police get frustrated, and I know family members as well, and there was a case here many years ago, and it's recently been resolved, apart from one victim's remains have yet to be found. There was a case in Western Australia where there was 3 victims, a very, very much a cold case that was open for many years. And there was a number of mediums that provided police with information. A lot of those leads went nowhere. The father of one of the victims put a call out to the public to ask for information or leads about where his daughter might be. And he got so many pieces of information from mediums or psychics that he followed every single lead and they went nowhere. And so it's really important that a lot of the psychics or mediums, and I am one, and need to make sure they're working professionally, ethically, and that they're not wasting police time or resources with information that they cannot prove, and that they're not re-traumatizing family members. It's a big responsibility that we have as mediums to ensure that we're holding a safe space.
That's a lot. I was actually expecting, more of, they're helping out and they've got us going, they're.
And look, there are very definitely cases where that's happened, and I've been involved in some where that has helped. Part of why I'm doing my PhD research is looking at what are the views of mediums, what are the views of police, and what are the views and perceptions of family members, because it involves all three. And I think you can't do that type of work without considering not only yourself, and sometimes that's where the medium's coming from and looking for some popularity and some runs on the board. And if that's where you're coming from, then you need to question why you're doing that work. And that's the problem. Professional, ethical, and that's really important. And do not put things out on some of the things I've seen on social media. You do not know if a family member will come across that post and see what you're writing. Some of it's absolutely disgusting. And there are others that are really professional and ethical and work very quietly in the background and don't put that out. It's up to family members how much they share. It's up to police how much they share. And so this particular type of work, if you're in it for the media coverage and the fame and the notoriety, then it's not the work for you.
No. I agree with that. I'm actually learning a lot about starting my own business and everything with all of my stuff, and I'm learning. And that is one of the things that it's being taught in this class I'm in is, you got to do it for the love of it. You can't do it for the money. You can't do it for the money or, like you're saying, the trophies and everything. You can't do it for that. You have to do it for the love.
And look, I will caveat that this is a business and this is my work. So, from a financial perspective, it's really important that, I can pay my rent, I can put a roof over my head, put food on the table. And so, any financial resources that come in for investigations or readings or sessions that I do or cases I investigate is to cover my time, my energy, my knowledge, my wisdom. Going through university and paying for 2 degrees and a master's program and now a PhD, that's my knowledge, my wisdom, my time, my energy, my resources that I also bring to every reading, every session, every investigation that I do. And I've taught homicide at university. I know the processes. I know the police processes from a criminology perspective. So I bring that to everything that I do. So it's not just, some people talk about being of service. I have to be of service to myself first, because
Right.
otherwise I can't do that work.
Right. Right.
So
Exactly.
I would
Exactly.
say that from a business perspective for any spiritual workers that, I really believe that be of service. It's about being of service to self first and then spirit, because they cannot
Mhm.
do the work without us and we can't do the
Right.
work without them. So if we're not healthy and well, and if we're continually focused on financial resources to cover our basic needs, that's going to translate in our connection with spirit. So how does that work? The universe spirit would never, ever want you limited or lacking. Never.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's amazing. This stuff is so amazing in all areas, all the time. So we're going to go in a little bit deeper, a little bit here. So, um, can you go back to childhood and can you explain some of the experiences you've had at that time? We know you've seen things, we know you've felt and heard, and all of this, but what kinds of things really jump out that was like amazing or the most scary or most amazing things?
Okay, let me just tap into spirit and get them to share some examples, because there's so many of them that I often forget. So I just rely on them bringing me through some examples that I
Okay.
can use. Way to use spirit, right?
Right,
Connecting
right.
to the resources that you have. Um, so I guess as a child, from learning about how my abilities worked, I would often sense, like I'd walk into a room, whether it was with family or friends or with other people that are around me, and I would all of a sudden have, for example, a pain in my knee or a headache or uh, chest pain or something like that, and that wasn't there previously. And so Spirit taught me how to recognize those physical changes in my body coming in and what they meant. And that's part of like that medical intuitive side of things that I've learnt and Spirit's taught me from a young age. So me thinking it was closed off and blocked, it wasn't. They were using my real world experiences to teach me. So, for example, if I have a knee pain come in, um, what I would do now is ask, is that mine? No, because if it happens really quickly, it's not. It wasn't there before I walked into that space or walked in with that person. I would then ask, is it the physical person that's with me? So, is it the human person? And if it is, it would be, is this a mental, emotional issue that they've got going on that needs to be healed and cleared? So, for example, knees might mean stubbornness or fear in moving forward or inflexibility.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Okay.
so I can go, okay, I've walked into a room, this person's got a knee pain. Have you got problems with your knee? And so I would only do that with certain people, obviously, because my boundaries are very strong with doing that. Um, and they'll say, yes, why? And I'll go, oh, okay. Is it a physical issue or is it just come on? and we'll talk through the mental, emotional side of things. So that might be in readings as well. Chest pain, heart, sadness, grief, loss, or there might be a physical issue going on that they need to address. Headaches, overthinking, overanalyzing, overwhelm. So that can be the human side of it. Or the other part is this a spirit person coming through? So it might be, have you lost I'm just going to kind of go with what's coming in, lost a grandfather that had a problem with a knee, that passed from a heart attack and was very intellectual and very intelligent and used his mind in his work. So those three issues can come through very differently if they're a human person or a spirit person. So that's one example of experiences for me that's helped me learn in amongst it. I won't bring through information for family members or friends or people without their conscious verbal permission. That's my boundary, unless it's life or death. And as I say that, Spirit always brings this example through for me, and I forget. When I was teaching many years ago, I was teaching a class, and I had a young lady who was from Papua New Guinea, a small island nation off kind of Australia's coast. And she would come into class sometimes, and there was something about her that just drew my attention. I didn't know why. And she'd leave, she'd be very quiet. Then she'd miss a few weeks and then come back again. My rule with spirit people is they are not allowed to come into my space. I don't see them as I'm going around my everyday world. Only when someone's asked for a reading that they come through. That's my boundary. I need balance in my life. And in this particular class, I noticed as I was teaching a loved one stand behind her, and I had to do a check-in with my guides and go, what's going on here? I told you no. She's not in a reading. She's not asked me. Why are you here? And then I went, oh, my boundary is unless it's life or death.
Oh.
So I asked that question and they said, yes, it is. So I actually asked her at the end of the class to just stay back for a minute for a conversation. So everyone else had left the room, and I said to her, this is going to seem like a really strange conversation to you. I'm just going to let you know that outside of this space, and I don't normally share this, I do some different types of work and around spiritual things. And she went, oh, okay. And I said, I've just got to ask you, has your dad passed? And I then went into some information, and she started crying. And I said to her, I don't know why this has happened because it doesn't normally. And I said, normally there's a reason for it. I said, are you really depressed? And have you gone to a bridge in the last few days? And she said, yes, I have. And I was going to go this afternoon again.
Wow.
And so her father in spirit circumvented the attempt to commit suicide. And I was then able to take her to the student counselor and get her some support and help. So that's another
awesome.
example.
Yeah, that's a kind of a mixed feeling kind of one, I feel really saddened by her, but at the same time, how exciting is it that you were able to help her and get her through that situation? I mean, it's a hard situation to be in.
And spirit placed her in my class for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I had to have that conversation for a reason. And I really clearly talked her through that I keep those things separately and it wouldn't be something that I would normally do. Um, the other thing that's popping into mention is personally, and we have our gifts come in personally as well, is from a fairly young age, I have lost a lot of loved ones. So I know about grief and loss. And as a natural medium whose strongest sense is feel and knowing, one of the things that I figured out along the way after a few was that there was a pattern that was happening for me when loved ones passed away. And for example, I have an aunt that passed from breast cancer. The instant that she passed, I sat up in bed and my radio went with a particular song and it wasn't turned on. And it wasn't until the next morning that my mum had said she'd passed and this was what time it had happened. And it was the exact same time that she'd passed. My one of my grandfathers that passed, I would often also get a really weird stomach pain prior to loved ones passing. And I said to my mum, and her and I worked together for a time, we were going to work and I said, oh, I'm just going to let you know I've got that really weird stomach pain again today. I don't know what's going on. Something feels odd. We went off to work. Within an hour, my dad rang to say that my grandfather had passed. So one of the, I guess, the gifts or the abilities of mediumship, and it can be challenging, is that we get a knowing in a sense when a soul passes, because energetically we're actually helping them pass over. And
that would make sense of why you're getting that feeling. I've never heard it that way. That makes absolute sense.
Yeah, so that's part of my abilities as a medium. And I've got a beautiful friend actually today, which is obviously why I'm mentioning it, who has a very dear friend who has a terminal brain cancer and is on her way out of the earth plane. And so my dear friend is heading to her friend's place this weekend to hold space and facilitate that end of life journey. And so in the last 2 days, I've been having those conversations about how souls come in and how they leave the earth and how we can hold that space to support them to cross over. When my brother-in-law passed, he was in a coma for 14 days before he left. And my husband and I were both holding that space for him. And, I could see all his passed over loved ones surrounding him in the hospital bed, giving him healing energy. And, my husband in particular is also a medium and an empath. And I'll never forget. And he woke me up and, the night before he passed, he said to me, I've got really sudden pain in my kidney. I don't know what's going on, and kind of gave him some healing. And the next morning we found out that his brother had kidney failure and had passed.
So do you think doing the Reiki and whatever on those parts like that helped the transition?
Yeah.
With it then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because all you're doing is, like, whether it's Reiki or any other form of healing that you do, it all comes from source and from love. So really it's just sending love.
Yeah. That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
Yeah. And what an honor and a privilege to be able to hold space for such a vulnerable and sacred part of a human being's experience in this lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be beautiful. It would be awesome to have that holding. I know I've said this many times on my show, but um, my brother was very fortunate to be able to see my mom pass. And so, I mean, I sometimes I kind of want to be jealous of him, but I know best. I know best that this was meant just for him to see.
Yeah,
And but what a joy! What a joy!
yeah. And thank you for that example because and this might help some people who may be in that space where they didn't get to see a loved one
Mhm.
prior to passing. And there's been many of those, particularly through COVID and all of that. Um,
Right.
Two things. When one of my grandmothers passed, she had a stroke and was in hospital. I was kind of 13, I think, 14 at the time. And my dad took me to the hospital, but not my younger sister. And so I got to see my grandmother in that space and to see that. My sister didn't. And she often talks about that. And I say
Mm.
to her, I'm actually really grateful that you didn't because I have a lasting memory of her in that state. My sister doesn't. She doesn't have that visual memory. She just visualizes her as as in her normal healthy state.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that came in really useful. My best friend and her sister passed over from lung cancer, and her sister was also a friend of mine. So, we'd known each other for a long time. And my best friend has three young girls. And she said to me in the lead up to her sister passing, she's like, we're trying to decide, do we let the girls, who some of one or two of them were quite young, come and see her in the hospital? So I shared with her my experience about my grandmother. I said, here's my perspective, and here's my sister's perspective. And I said, so it's up to you what you feel is
Yeah.
best for your girls. It gives a beautiful opportunity for you to step into teaching them and talking them through how to say goodbye and let go and honor
Hmm.
that. Or you can do that in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's many different ways of allowing that to happen. I know, what was it, like 2 weeks before she did pass, I gave her the okay to go ahead and go when she was ready. And so
Yeah,
I think that was my way of saying goodbye to her,
yeah,
and
yeah,
my sister was the same way. She was able to, I got her permission too to tell my mom, it's okay. We're going to be okay. And then my brother got to see her pass. And
yeah.
so, I mean, we had our different ways of saying goodbye, and we all do.
Exactly. Exactly. And sometimes it's also about the human person needing to close some energy loops or do some healing with the person that's sitting there holding that space to help them pass.
And that's what my
It's
brother did.
yeah, and it might be about doing some forgiveness or some having a conversation that needs to be had to kind of go, I love you, thank you, I'm grateful, or the I'm sorry, I forgive, or whatever, to then finally allow the human that final journey to take place. And my husband uh, with his father that also passed recently. Um, he got to see him, got to have that conversation, and had the conversations prior to go. It's okay to go when you're ready. He'd obviously had some conversations with his 7 children along the way. But my husband got
Yeah,
to see him, had that conversation, and said it's okay to go. And he went out and walked his dog, and when he came back, he'd passed.
that's happened too with us. Yeah. Yeah. Only certain people get to actually see our loved ones pass because of
Yeah.
what needs to happen at the time.
And
Yeah.
sometimes our loved ones need to cross over when no one's there because it allows them to let go and not have we have a human connection and we want them to stay. So it's hard for them
Right.
sometimes to be able to let go because we're there going, stay, 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 get better.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And so
agree. Yeah.
sometimes it happens when people walk out of the room, suddenly they pass. That's why.
Yeah. I see that. I see that. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I mean, this is great information, and I love what you do.
Thank you.
What you do is so important.
Thank you.
And I hope the police departments can really start helping us or mediums, start helping family members and work as a collection there to help
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I think it'd be beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
It's awesome. It's beautiful. So yeah. So well, thank you for being on the show
Pleasure.
and talking about these experiences because it's again, it's just beautiful and it's needed and it's
Yeah.
welcomed. So at least in my heart.
Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share with you and your viewers. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, our time is about up. So I hate to have to say this, but we got but anyways, I want to thank you. And if anybody else out there that has any stories that you would like to share and tell the world what you've experienced about the paranormal or supernatural, please email me at lighttalk423@gmail.com. And while you're at it, click on the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And we will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.